Bertie Songthrush is an incredibly insecure individual, and she had to fight tooth and nail to learn how to trust others and herself. Insecure is the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about her characteristics within the show. She's not known to be very outspoken or expressive about her desires or disapprovals. It has affected her opportunities in life, her relationships, and her self-belief. However, no one is born with an insecure mindset. A lot of it is built in the early stages of life. And if we're honest, it's not easy to talk about. To see what the first thing that may be the cause of these insecurities within Bertie, we have to go way back to when she was very young at the age of 12, where she would go to the Jilly Lakes for the summer. Her goal around that time was to be able to swim all the way from the camp to the Peanut Butter Island. It was something that Bertie was working incredibly hard towards, to the point where many people have noticed her hard work. Even one that has been the main cause of her trust in men to be dismantled forever. This man was a lifeguard that took away Bertie's bodily autonomy at a very young age. When something like this happens, it's something that can be incredibly difficult to process for a girl at that age. Something of that nature can be lasting to an individual's psyche. Items, scenery, and even certain individuals they have known when the incident happened can remind them and make the individual feel more uneasy and tense. That's especially the case with not a lot of avenues there to assist you in going through the trauma of what had occurred. Coach Maple, her swimming coach at camp, was never told about the situation, while her parents brushed the incident away when they were informed of what happened. That caused her to bottle up her emotions and isolate herself more. That would continue into her time in high school. Her parents sent her off to the guidance counselor, who didn't know how to handle the situation because mental health in teenagers is not focused on nearly enough, and her friend group labeled her negatively when she talked about her issues. When avenues get closed, many young minds tend to lose their self-worth and their sense of self. It leads them to a... Now, I've stated this before. The high school experience is kinda stupid. A lot of relationships you have within that era of your life changes drastically throughout it. For someone who has been scarred like Bertie has, it can lead to a lot of vulnerability to be laid on the table. Someone who is desperate to have anyone be by their side when they need it the most. As I stated, Bertie was having to deal with that herself after her parents, her peers, and teachers refused or did not have the ability to help go through that pain. Bertie was desperate for anyone to be able to at least comfort her. This is where Muriel enters the chat. Now, I've talked about her in the episode she was featured in a long time ago, and I try to take things from both hers and Bertie's perspectives. While there was definitely some pushback and misunderstandings of my points when talking about how Muriel feels, this one will solely focus on Bertie and her feelings, as this played a major role in why she is incredibly insecure. So, starting things off, we should talk about how Muriel introduced herself to Bertie. I think from Bertie's perspective, she is considered to be a strong girl that isn't afraid of anything. The Gothic aesthetic has always had a stigma to be one that doesn't care what the outside world thinks of them. Their bluntness is seen as a strength, which is something that Bertie quickly became enamored by, as she is desperate to find the strength to move on from the traumatic experience she has faced. Muriel being willing to listen to issues and showing what Bertie perceives as empathy by sharing her own demons she had to overcome gave Bertie a light that she went after immediately. Bertie wanted to embody what Muriel represents, so she wanted to follow the same footsteps to be able to achieve that. She will do everything that Muriel tells her to do, from changing her looks, to stealing, to listening to rock music. Her desire to want to evolve into something that is more confident really molds her into being a lost puppy that Muriel can take in and take care of. However, to fit with the puppy analogy, some would want to train them for selfish desires. In the bigger picture, Muriel does not see Bertie in the same light as vice versa. Muriel viewed Bertie as more of a fill-in rather than a close friend. And in order for Bertie to fit what she deems as presentable to those that belong in her circle of few, changes had to be made. So she made Bertie do things that she isn't known to do from those that knew her at the time. They passed notes during class, Bertie talked back to her mother, and shoplifted everything they wanted. The things that they were doing were wrong, but it felt so right for Bertie. For Muriel, it was what she expected. Muriel's relationship with Bertie is very toxic, and it was from the very start. She pushed Bertie into doing these things to satisfy her own needs of having a goth friend after her long-term buddy Jessica had decided to take a break from Muriel. So she needed someone to replace the hole that was left. Muriel thought Bertie was the best choice. After all, Bertie was willing to explain her traumatic experience, and when she heard it, Muriel saw someone who can be fast-tracked down the gothic pipeline to be able to match that same energy. However, in her mind, it was supposed to be a temporary situation. She didn't really see her as truly goth because Muriel only introduced it to her. So when Jessica eventually returned to her side, she was ready to leave Bertie behind because she assumed she would revert to being who she was prior to this arrangement. However, as many people would say, there's a reason that ass is in the word assumption. Going back to the episode, I think I can analyze why the kiss happened in the first place. Muriel wanted to freak Bertie out. If we place the present day of Bertie's universe the same time it was released, which was 2022, I would assume, no pun intended, that Bertie was in high school from 2004 to 2008. The mid-2000s did not think of homosexuality very highly around this time period, considering that most people consider it to be unappealing to see two people of the same gender to be together. It is more frowned upon. With Muriel's mindset of going against the grain and the establishment, Muriel kissing Bertie would prove to be too much for Bertie in her eyes. Since Bertie has only been on the gothic scene for around a half of a semester, I would say, so she felt that Bertie would have freaked out about that experience and would cut her off entirely. Unfortunately, that was not the case.
Well, what do you want to do after school? You want to go to the diner and get crinkle fries? Or we could just go to my house and make out in my room all afternoon. Ah, just kidding.
Bertie was hooked. She felt like Muriel and her were meant to be together right then and there. With someone who is emotionally unstable as Bertie is at this point, any sort of affection could feel everlasting to the individual that yearns for safety and support. So considering that Bertie thinks of Muriel highly, a kiss from someone she idolizes confirms that she is not only an equal to Muriel, but also someone she views as a soulmate. It shows that you need to be careful with those who are around Bertie's age that has been mentally scarred, as your decisions can lead you into a situation neither of you want to be in. Instead of being upfront about what their relationship actually is, Muriel does things that are more unforgivable, dragging Bertie along on this false notion that there were shared feelings between the two of them, making her feel that this clear disconnect is more on you losing interest when it wasn't there to begin with. So Bertie tries to salvage something that didn't exist, pushing herself onto Muriel and trying everything to show her loyalty to the young bat. However, it only annoyed Muriel even more. As the tension and awkwardness built between the two, the social cues became obvious and it tore Bertie apart. The one person that she viewed as a savior from her loneliness has decided to shut her out. What made matters worse was when Bertie was at her lowest point in this saga. Those that are working for the school newspaper took advantage as she looks like the most gothic of the entire school. There is a sense of irony to this. Dealing with legitimate pain and grief can triumph any gothic aesthetic tenfold. The amount of pain of being betrayed over and over again from a variety of people can only happen so much to a single individual. It makes them more unstable in controlling their emotions and leaves them vulnerable to any predatory individual that is ready to take advantage of them, which ended up being the yearbook photographer in this case. Seeing how a lot of younger individuals have selfish tendencies that blocks them from being self-aware of the current state of a person, it's no surprise that an aspiring journalist, I don't know what to call those who do the yearbooks, to want to take what they believe to be the most interesting people to place in the yearbook. It's unfortunate because a lot of kids don't grasp the concept of consent very well. The combination of the lack of consent and the lack of strength Bertie had put the icing on the cake for Bertie to return to her lowest point once again.
You won Gothiest?
I did? I didn't mean to. I didn't know.
How could you do this?
When Muriel and Bertie found out about the reasoning for these photos, the mask was completely off from Muriel. Tired of the affection Bertie was trying her hardest to give, she completely went off on her for something that is completely minuscule in the long run. As I've alluded to, most teenagers think very selfishly, and Muriel is no different in that regard. She didn't see Bertie as worthy of the title most gothiest because Bertie barely tasted the aesthetic. So she felt the need to tell it like it is, not understanding that Bertie has dealt with a lot more pain than she could ever understand. She is upset that her pain is stronger than her looks. So her thoughts are to continue to lower Bertie's self-esteem and confidence by breaking the friendship outright and forgetting everything that she has done to her and continue to be a success while leaving Bertie defeated. Muriel is not a good person, and more times than not, those who are not good people find some success in life. What makes this sadder is that while Muriel completely forgot what had happened in high school, Bertie completely blamed herself for their falling out. Thankfully, Tuca was there to remind her that those struggles are what helped make Bertie become her best friend for life. So these major moments in her life played a factor in why her insecurities are very strong in the present day. You can become very sympathetic towards how she acts with other people and how she doesn't feel comfortable being open both physically and emotionally. However, these insecurities weighed her down even more so as she traveled her way into adulthood. One issue her insecurities have done is hinder Bertie when trying to achieve her goals. One of these instances was in her first job when she was aiming to get a promotion. Now, this is where we see her insecurities come to light right even before she wanted to execute the plan she thought of in her head. Even Tuca saw how this was going to go when she states,
"So you're just gonna hope your boss remembers you exist, reads your mind, and gives you what you want."
This is something that Speckle and Tuca have seen happen many times before this. She never had the confidence to simply ask her employer for the promotion she knows she earned. However, instead of asking directly, she tries to push herself to socially control the workplace. However, her insecurities pop up at every turn, and it especially was the case when we're introduced to her coworker, Dirk. Every avenue she attempts to have her boss notice her, it gets trampled by Dirk. Dirk is the third individual that enables Bertie's insecurities. He's your stereotypical frat boy that has no problem stepping over people that can be seen as weak, which is certainly the case with Bertie. Note that this is from Dirk's point of view. I personally am not saying she's weak. Now keep your paws off your damn keyboards and keep watching. Anyways, Dirk is someone that enjoys trying to smooth his way into getting better opportunities. He's very charismatic and can easily seem likable with his headstrong and deceitfully cool personality. He's considered to be the first obstacle we see Bertie face within the show, and it embodies how her insecurities can take over and place her in awkward situations out in public, where Dirk can come in and take over much to the dismay of Bertie. So after Dirk steals Bertie's thunder again and again, he makes a move that relifts the darkness that she succumbed to at an early age.
I just need to buck up and ask Holland for something.
Oh yeah? Is that why you wore that tight sweater today?
What?
From that interaction, you can see how quickly her insecurities flare up. When Dirk went on to sexualize Bertie's body, you can easily compare that comment to the lifeguard's predatory comments toward her when she was young. Being able to compare the red sweater she wore to work to the red swimsuit she wore at summer camp, red seems to be the common color between these two items, with the symbolisms being attached to this color is seen as love, desire, and danger. The color red is sexualized in the media a lot, so it makes sense that this is a color that is featured a lot during her time of distress. These normal clothing items are being used as a target. This isn't the fault of Bertie by any means for wearing these clothes. Really, it's the fault of society over-sexualizing women to the point where people outright believe that wearing a piece of clothing means that you are consenting to be sexualized by the public. It really places anyone, especially a woman, to become very self-conscious of what they wear in order to avert prying eyes. And Bertie is a prime example of that. Dirk reinforced those demons, and it's a prime example of how her insecurities make it easy for others to walk over her. Of course, Dirk is only a smaller obstacle Bertie had to deal with. There is another man that embodies every demon that Bertie has dealt with. That is Pastry Pete.
Stay in there, so don't worry. And I've got plenty of fresh, stay in there, spaggins for you. The color can ruin you.
Pastry Pete is someone that needs no introduction to the type of person he is. Much like with the lifeguard, Pete was able to obtain the trust of Bertie by admiring her culinary skills and wanted to take her in as an assistant. He essentially groomed Bertie during her time working under him. He was ready to see how far he can push Bertie into doing whatever he wants, being a loyal servant more than anything else, giving her opportunities to see the luxurious lifestyle of being one of the top pastry chefs, while also being able to take various ideas she has and make it his own, even to place her in a sexual predicament where she became very submissive. She didn't realize this at first because Pastry Pete has a celebrity status that grants him the ability to get away with a lot of things. He is considered to be the best of the best in Birdtown, and Bertie wanted to be able to achieve that goal and considers him to be an idol at one point. So Pete had the ability to make women that look up to him tools for his desires. And if an individual decides to break ties to him due to the abuse, he will go out of his way to try and diminish any opportunities. Bertie's had to deal with that when she realized Pete's true intentions and decided to end the relationship. He decided to block Bertie from being able to get imported ingredients from various stores, not be able to purchase a workspace for her kitchen, or be able to set up at a farmer's market to be able to open up her business. Even continuing to gaslight her to believe that she was the one that was trying to use Pete to get ahead. Of course, she was able to overcome Pete with the help of all of her friends, exposing the terrible person Pastry Pete is, and was willing to help mass produce the pastry she needed for a massive amount of orders. While she was able to stick it to the penguin, her insecurities made it take her a long time to see what was actually happening, and she did need the push from friends like Tuca to remove her from the situation she was in. That is the great start to being able to help those that are insecure to have someone who is more confident to guide them into being more assertive when needed. However, being where Bertie is could tend to push her friends away. The people that are around you could only handle dealing with your insecurities for so long. While friends are willing to do everything they can to help you out, there is a limit. That's especially the case when your insecurities could affect them offhandedly. You could look no further than how her relationship with Dakota had fallen. Dakota is a younger woman who has come from the countryside that was enamored by Bertie and her culinary skills. She came at a very important time for Bertie, as she had a falling out with Tuca for a moment and was in need of someone to be a close friend. The two hit it off as they had plenty of things in common, and Dakota felt like Bertie was a mentor. However, this was also around the time where Pastry Pete once again showed his cards. Only this time, Bertie was there to witness it all. From the onlooking perspective of Bertie, she clearly saw the intentions of Pastry Pete when he took women under his wing. The cold stare he gave to Bertie with a sadistic smirk, as she is allowing him to get away with his sexual desires, where Bertie has to get Dakota out of the situation. However, insecurities prevented Bertie from being able to protect her from the chef. Fortunately, Dakota has one thing that was different from Bertie that was able to get her out of the situation.
What the f***? Don't touch touch me, you weirdo!
You're overreacting. Relax.
No, I'm not, you creep!
While it does seem like she was a more naive girl when being introduced to her for the first time, it actually isn't the case at all. She was able to be aware of the situation she was put in, and she swiftly removed herself from the situation and called Pete out in the process. Dakota was able to be headstrong and brave for being able to be the first bird to combat Pete with no assistance from anyone. However, that in turn made Dakota see Bertie differently after she was put in that situation. Bertie knew in her heart that what Pete was doing was wrong, but she didn't have the awareness at the time when it happened to her. And when she witnessed the sinful act being done to someone else, she froze, not knowing what to do. This felt like a betrayal to Dakota, especially after Bertie checked up on her to see if she was okay. She tried to make the situation seem lighter than what it actually was, dubbing it as Pete being passionate, when in reality, Pete was another creepy predator in a chef uniform.
You know what he did was wrong, right? I looked up to you.
This was one of the many wake-up calls Bertie had. The guilt and shame that she felt when she allowed that to happen made her realize that she needed to be more assertive, not only to protect herself, but also others. As the show went on, she was able to take on a lot of her insecurities by doing a myriad of things. Some of the few are going to therapy and discussing the trauma of her past, being more open and honest on how she feels about a situation, and becoming more understanding of other perspectives. She was able to take on one of her biggest obstacles alone.
That's a fine puff you're poking there.
Winter Garcia is a female role model. She is seen as a very high celebrity in the field of culinary arts. So when Garcia acknowledges Bertie's work and wants to take her under her wing, Bertie was enamored with the idea and was willing to sacrifice her own business to work with her. However, what she didn't realize is that when it comes to making it to the top, Winter had to work with people in power who are corrupt. This is something that Bertie witnessed when Winter agreed to be by Pete's side when he wanted to open a mentorship program for young women, both to rebuild his image as a prominent figure and also to continue disgusting practices with younger women. With Bertie already having the experience of being on the sidelines and how that felt, she wasn't going to sit idly by. She decided to take on her insecurities and express how she feels.
I heard you're working with Pastry Pete on that mentorship program. It's just so disappointing.
This isn't an easy task, especially for someone like Bertie. Having to speak your mind about certain issues to someone you consider not only as a mentor, but also a motherly figure. So, being in this situation, her insecurities would be seen as something that could make her crumble in this situation. However, with everything she learned during her time in therapy, her experiences with her loved ones, she was able to take on this conversation head on, and it's something I consider to be powerful.
So we both agree this is toxic bullshit, but you believe every young chef should be forced to endure it and toughen up, because that's easier than changing a messed up system, right?
During this dispute, we understand that Winter had to adapt to the environment she was placed in early on in her career, being harassed by co-workers and even her supposed mentor at the time. She was forced to simply endure it because any sort of protest could result in losing her job. There's a saying that falls true into not just any profession, but also in life, that you are in a product of your environment. Having to bite down and endure the misogynistic tenure in the kitchen molded her to not be sympathetic to the younger generation who are trying to break in. She doesn't believe in this false notion of being viewed as a victim of abuse. In her point of view, her peers didn't break her much to their dismay. However, from those on the outside, it can be seen that she had to be a stepping stone in order for her own platform to flourish and become the female role model within the field. She had to be a sponge for others' toxicity to get to the top. Bertie recognizes that, and she needed to express those concerns in order for Winter to have a different mindset when it comes to the younger generation. It did work. While she still held her beliefs of what you need to do to have a successful career, she did have an appreciation for Bertie expressing what she believed in. This was a huge step when it comes to being able to take on any opposition, especially from those who you consider to have a close relationship with. These types of conversations are very difficult to have with family and peers alike because you don't want to risk that relationship ending. Having certain stances on the structure of fields and politics alike can lead you dangerously heated conversations that could tear you apart, especially when insecurities looming over. It's an important step for Bertie because not only does it show the bravery she has garnered during the time we got to know her, but also has earned the respect of her mentor even more so, with her deciding to no-show Pastry Pete's event, as well as express her gratitude of Bertie wanting to speak her mind and counter her thoughts of the younger generation of being weak-minded. Bertie's journey is a beautiful one to behold when we get into how she was able to tackle her insecurities in life. It's not something that can be easy to handle depending on what causes the insecurities in the first place, especially when it comes to those betraying that trust. It can easily consume you if you aren't able to think with a clear mind. However, with the help of friends, family, trials, and tribulations, you can overcome them. Bertie is the embodiment of that, and can easily be seen as a role model in this instance. No one is going to be perfect at showing confidence in yourself and what you believe in. However, it's always a good thing to try and obtain the agency you deserve as a person.